Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Eugyppius. He's a blogger from Germany, and he got his start online by speaking about the data-based analysis of the response to the novel coronavirus. Since then, he's branched out to analyze historical and ideological impulses and pressures that are going on in politics more broadly. In this conversation, we focus mostly on Germany, its historical and present situation, and what's going on in that country from his point of view. You can find his work linked below, as well as links to support this channel. Without further ado, here is Eugyppius. What's your general relationship to modernity? Are you a believer?
It's a big question. Sure, why not? I believe in modernity. I believe technological progress and all that it entails, and all of the cultural, administrative, political, economic systems that it drags with it is just inexorable. So you have to deal with it and deal with it. It's not a force we control; it controls us. It's sort of, we've opened a Pandora's box, and we're along for the ride. So you can't reject it or get away from it. I think it's morally neutral mostly. I am very opposed to ideas of progress or things getting better. I think that's very naive. But yeah. So I guess I embrace modernity. I like aspects of it and dislike others.
Are you especially patriotic, and is it problematic for a German to be patriotic in today's age?
Well, I don't know. So I don't, this is an awkward question. There's no way to answer it in a way that won't piss people off. I think sort of some degree of nationalist sentiment is obviously necessary for states to function, or at least for nation states as we've constructed them to work. And I believe that this sentiment is overmuch suppressed in Europe, sure, in Germany especially, right? And it's been so much suppressed that the country as it is now is not really capable of defending itself or continuing itself in the longer term. So obviously nationalism below a certain point, or being suppressed below a certain point, is bad. Obviously you can have too much nationalism and go crazy, develop very suppressive, repressive societies. I don't want to live in a place like that either. Personally, how do I feel? I don't know. I guess I'm more nationalist than the average German, but I'm also, I don't know, I've lived a lot of my life abroad. I find really, really overt patriotism and so forth, just for me personally, a little bit, it doesn't fit my personality well. So I try to be a little soft-spoken about that. But, I totally support patriotic people, and I don't have a problem with that at all. And I think it's fundamentally healthy, Do
you think it's a little bit cringe? And what generation would you pin yourself in? Gen X or?
Late. I'm either very, very young Gen X or very, very old millennium generation. I would say it can be all things in moderation. Of course you can become a parody of yourself, talking about all the great things your country did or why it's so awesome and fantastic. You can easily overdo it, but at the same time, again, I think fundamentally these are positive, pro-social attitudes, just like being enthusiastic about your family is fundamentally good, but believing every one of your children is a special snowflake genius is perhaps excessive, So
you brought up that you used to be a philologist. Where do you pour your intellectual energies recently, the last couple of years?
Yeah, so I write, my blog mainly, I write about politics, about political theory, try to develop sort of higher level understandings of how German politics in particular, but how the West itself is functioning and where it's going, where it's come from since the end of the Cold War, and where it's going now. So it's so I moved from the past. I was sort of tired of a lot of that old stuff to the modern era. Yeah, it's
Have you brought anything with you from the past, analytical tools or perspective that you're keenly aware of? I'm sure you have.
The one thing you really get from doing things at the ancient world, and where you have very limited sources and there's a lot of uncertainty. But I'd say a couple of things. One is you get really good at pattern recognition. You try to see recurring patterns and themes across different texts, across different inscriptions, over long periods of time. You also try to understand recurring sort of obviously, as a scholar, one of the main things you want to do is write interesting articles and discover things or critique other people's work. So you also try to develop a sense of patterns for the kinds of errors scholars tend to make, what across different eras, also understand certain scholars, their own failings or what they overlook. So you look at leaders in the field. What is he doing wrong? What does he tend to do wrong? How can I critique his work, or how can I add to it? That sort of thing. So you get good at pattern recognition.
Yeah,
that's a big one. The ancient world. I don't know. It gives you a lot of perspective on the modern era, because you understand how much different things were and how much different they can be, and how contingent a lot of our life is, a lot of our culture is.
Mm-hmm. There's a word or a phrase, a concept that's been bandied about quite frequently over the past 6 months to a year. It's called the post-war consensus. Is that a useful lens for you, this post-war consensus, how the world operates post-World War II? It seems to be eroding, or at least a lot of commentators say that it is breaking apart. I'm wondering, from your perspective, if that's a salient concept, and have you been able to introduce any nuance or retool it to give us a better perspective on where the West, broadly speaking, is going?
So, of course, there's definitely a post-war era in politics, and in Western, European, North American politics. I would say that there's a very important division after the end of the Cold War, and so there's really two blocks of time. And at the end of the Cold War, liberal democracies and the whole liberal democratic world no longer felt itself opposed by an alternative system. Mm-hmm. And this had very important effects on how liberal ideology, liberal, I guess here with the small L, not meaning leftists like in North America, but meaning people who believe in individual rights and freedom, self-determination, so forth. This ideology grew and achieved new dimensions in this belief that it was the correct global ideology, that it was historically an endpoint, that it was almost scientifically right and predetermined, and that all peoples were destined to fall in line with the same sort of thought and the same political philosophy, and so that began in the 90s, and you see it growing and growing in this confidence, in this ideological system growing, and so that's a new era, and I think that's what's breaking apart right now. So the second chapter of the post-war consensus perhaps is coming to an end.
Yeah. So to summarize that collective of coarseness, or taken for granted ideological arrow of progressive liberalism, increasing rights, erosion of obligatory forms of identity, up to and including your sex and your gender. Everything that we call woke right now, or have been calling woke for the past 5 years, is the accelerated kind of baby or offspring of that liberal order with those liberal presuppositions.
Yes, the liberalization of ever more aspects of culture, personal identity, everything is the ideology it runs through all of our lives, and it's always finding new things to liberalize and improve, right? And it doesn't stop. It progresses not only in the sense of progress, but throughout all the fissures and the sinews of society, places that were never considered politically important before. Yes.
Yeah. So where do you think that leads, or is that what's ending, that rapid metastasization of liberalism into progressivism? Is that ending, or is it just reaching an endpoint? And what are the patterns that you see emerging right now that are resisting it or going in a different direction?
Right. So the liberal democratic world clearly still exists, but now there are alternatives. So the alternative power centers, alternative ways of living become clearer and clearer. So there's China and Russia, and what's kind of interesting about them is they don't really. Well, the Chinese, I guess, are formally communist, but they have elements of free market economies. They are. Yeah. they're sort of a mixed ideological system, and they're not very doctrinaire. And the same thing with Russia; they just do whatever's pragmatic and works. So we see alternative systems that are much more pragmatic and less dogmatic ideologically. And so unlike during the Cold War, where there were two competing ideological systems, liberalism is no longer opposed by contrary ideologies, but it's opposed by contrary systems. And there's a way to think outside of the liberal world and to imagine other ways of existing in a way that wasn't possible before, at least in the immediate post-Cold War period. Another thing.
No, yeah, go on, please. No, go on.
Oh, the other thing, the other aspect, I think, is that the increasing liberalization and the introduction of liberal principles to ever finer and more arcane aspects of our lives has resulted in some very extreme outcomes, and these a lot of people find unpalatable, and so there's been a drawing back from, for example, gender identity theory. A lot of the post-racial consensus, I think, is manifestly absurd, and this is clear to people. There's been a pulling back from this, and sort of a collapse in this ideological area, which has destroyed another element of liberal mythology, which is of the constant progress, right? Because it seems like, well, I guess we're not really progressing all the time, and things that you sold to us as progress were really a mistake. Mm-hmm. And so that's another area in which I think the ideological system is having problems.
You made a really interesting distinction between the liberal ideological order and then these alternative systems. From a Western person's point of view, the ideology and the system are married so thickly that it's hard to tell it apart. It's hard to tell the difference between the European Union as an idea and as an entrenched system of bureaucratic states. I mean, it's obviously an entrenched system of bureaucracy and state apparatus, but it's clothed so much in this ideological lens and level and progression of decision making. It's hard for us to step out and see things as a system divorced from ideology. Could you help me understand how China or Russia just show a model of a system that it's less wed to ideology, or is it wed to a different idea of what a state is? Like Putin as a czar, let's say, like Putin as the manifestation of the will of Russia, as distinct from the European Union being the manifestation of this bureaucratic liberal order, or the more Western tiered, mutually combative systems of government that have a lot of process injected into the personhood of the state. I just did a big gunshot, but I'm trying to get a better understanding if we can analyze the system of liberalism as a system as distinct from a ideology.
Yes. So well, obviously all governments are essentially institutions or clusters of institutions, and they try to behave in their own interests, right? And so it's always an interesting question. What influence does ideology have on these systems? Is it simply a superstructure that is how these systems express their interests, but doesn't really influence their behavior very much? Mm-hmm. Or is it actually fundamental to how these systems work? And I think one can overstate the case for the liberal West that. You can overstate it in both directions, right? I think it's absolutely not true that liberalism has no influence on the functioning of government and that everything would be just like it is now, but without a lot of vocabulary or something. Yeah. If liberalism wasn't there, that's ridiculous. On the other hand, it's clear that there is substantial ideological influence, and a lot of the crazy stuff that our governments do is motivated in some way either by liberal ideology itself or by the procedural imperatives of liberal ideology. So this causes our states to function in different ways. Now, as for, let's just take Russia, for example, a lot of people, even some centrists or Western skeptics or on the right, you hear all the time, Putin is a great statesman, or something like this, right? They're just so impressed by him and his speeches and his statements. And this is because Putin just clearly articulates interests. He just, when he gives even the Tucker Carlson interview or whenever he makes statements, he or Lavrov or whoever in Russia, they're not such great statesmen, they're ordinary people, but they clearly articulate interests in a way that our politicians cannot. They always have to be talking about international law or the rights of people in the Ukraine or something like that. And they just can't clearly state what they want out of a certain conflict or situation. Yeah. So this is a very simple way in which you can see how Russia functions in a different way, and it feels very almost cathartic for Westerners to hear politicians from outside the Western world address political questions, problems, conflicts, because it's just so honest and direct. And so that's how you can see outside of the liberal system how there are other ways of thinking. Our politicians, even when they're acting indirectly in their own interests, rarely state that and often come up with very convoluted liberal justifications for what's going on. It's not all that different from how communist states in the Soviet bloc worked a long time ago, where everything had to be constructed as, it's on behalf of the workers, and it's all the fascists that are ruining our economy. That's why everything's so bad and so forth. Everything cloaked in all these sort of antiquated constructs.
Yeah, I wonder to what extent that's cultural based, because liberalism spread from, the bedrock of it is the Enlightenment, and it was developed a lot by Scotsmen, and then implemented by England in the wars, the succession of conflicts that we call World War I and World War II. British ideology became synonymous with liberalism, which probably manifested a certain sort of British way of understanding, a British way of politicking. So there's probably a cultural component of why the politicians are hiding under the name of decency or these different rights, these different kind of shrouds of intent that we can call ideological or just paying less lip service to things. There's a cultural component, but it also might speak to the aging of the system as, or the population of the system of government by people who are less strong-willed and more just go along to get along and rising through the ranks just because they followed through on the order, like an aging state like Russia. It's no longer in the interest of people to be self-interested blatantly, perhaps because of culture and the historical context of how it manifested and grew, but also it might speak to a decay in the system that disallows honesty. I wonder.
Yeah, I could see a few things like this. One thing that liberal systems seem to have in common, a way they function differently from alternative political systems, is they involve vast numbers of people in decision-making processes.
Yes.
So states already have a lot of people involved, doing anything, military operations or so forth. But a liberal democracy, an advanced liberal democracy like Germany, will have an order of magnitude more people involved in even simple aspects of governance than alternative systems will, and this lends the state sort of curious personality. It tends to banalize the state's decisions. So everything's always sort of an average consensus view of what your typical 115 IQ bureaucrat thinks is a good idea. So there's not a lot of room for really good ideas or for decisive interventions to make facts and change situations. Sort of a safetyism, a desire to hide within institutions. Nobody wants to be responsible for mistakes. This is a very characteristic feature of especially European governments, but to some degree US also. There's one way in which liberal systems seem to have very different means of functioning, and they also I've not really seen. Don't want to go out on a limb here. Maybe it's true that China also has very elaborate bureaucracy, but the speed with which, for example, the Federal Republic of Germany acquired a massive bureaucratic apparatus after our foundation in 1949, it's breathtaking, and I think also a symbol of a symptom of liberal democracy. Again, this desire to establish institutions and procedures for everything, to do everything. This phobia of corruption. I think a little bit of corruption maybe not bad. It's sort of a price you pay for certain aspects of efficiency and so forth. But this phobia of this absolute commitment to public governance and developing offices and sub-offices and special bureaus for everything you can conceive of, for wiping your ass. All this stuff is really. I invite you to live in Germany for a couple of years and try to do anything here. You have to get a permit from somebody. It's often easier just to get fined. It's a really bloated, ridiculous system. And it seems very typical. Where, for example, talking with a Russian friend, he was like, "Yes, well, Russia has a lot of these pretensions, but the enforcement mechanisms aren't always there. So you sort of learn which laws you have to worry about and which ones everyone just sort of ignores. And it's on balance, it's not as hard. So another symptom of."
So to give some lip service to Carl Schmitt, you can tell a lot about power, or the actual substance of power, or the location of power rather, by the ways in which power is makes exceptions to rules. And if you can say that Western liberal democracies have a problem because of their concern with proceduralism, or just their manifest addiction to proceduralism, or that's just how they function, and spreading out consent and spreading out also responsibility at the same time, they're slow to make decisions. But if you look at what happened during COVID, they were very fast at making decisions. What was exceptional about COVID that you think describes the system of power that we live under? Because during that period of time, they made very quick decisions that were incredibly authoritarian, and I guess it was still distributed with regard to responsibility, but they still made exceptions to rules during that time.
Yes, they did. COVID is very intriguing. I have a whole book on it I need to finish about exactly how it happened, especially in Germany. But the way that happened was, well, first of all, it seemed fast. But in fact, the energy for this had been building for a long time. Okay. And so there's an entire, I call it the pandemicist establishment. So all these public health freaks who sit around and nobody knew who they were or anything about them before, they're kind of losers who would appear once a year during flu season on the evening television and tell you to get a flu shot.
With their doomsday clock. They're like, it's almost time to get a cough.
Exactly. And nobody cared. And all the time in the background, they had been, helping draft emergency legislation in the event of a pandemic. They had been developing and propagating within institutions this myth of the coming pandemic. And this was a whole idea. And a lot of these mechanisms were just tripwires waiting for the right disease to fall. And then when it happened,
the Floyd riots, it was waiting for the infrastructure was already there. It was waiting for the proper trigger.
Yeah, and you could see like a lot of these events, also like the Floyd riots, they tried to happen a few times before it really goes off. The swine flu in 2009 was a big one where they tried to make it happen, but it wasn't quite there. So something big is in the post when they're trying to have pandemics and it's just not coming through. You're going to get hit with something really bad. In retrospect, you can see it. Same thing with Floyd. They tried to have Floyd riots before they really kicked off. Aubrey and so forth, right? So all those mechanisms were set up. The big surprise was the pandemic response was really supposed to be. You go back and read all the white papers and stuff for years. Was supposed to be accelerated vaccination campaign, at most regional school closures. Nothing all that crazy otherwise, because they rightly intuited that these heavy-handed public health measures are worthless. They don't really suppress viruses,
and they probably cause a chain reaction that would lose them power. So they don't want to go too far.
Yeah, no policy. Also, you can't advertise that in advance, but I really think there was no plan to do anything like that. But the pandemicist establishment themselves, internationally networked group of several thousand epidemiologists, and virologists, and vaccinologists, and immunologists in public health institutions, they all became rapidly convinced that the Chinese approach was correct. Some of this seems to have been very, almost nefarious, very clever marketing from China itself, I think, so they wouldn't be internationally embarrassed if the rest of the world didn't lock down and didn't look like their lockdown was for nothing. It's kind of my feeling
I
about
could
that.
see them gambling that if they could trip up the rest of the world, they could much more rapidly get back online and then do some sort of catch up or get ahead of everybody economically.
Might be something like that, but we see after we had started to open, the Chinese still couldn't get their heads around just letting it spread, and they had destructive lockdowns going well to 2022, I believe, which suggests there was some true believers involved in their system. But who knows? It's kind of a black box. But I think they were really convinced by the Chinese response, or worried about that they would be discredited if they didn't do anything, and the Chinese turned out to have the answer. And so within the space of a couple of weeks, they used all the authorities that they had accumulated, their emergency authorities they had accumulated over years, to force this thing through. And of course it's a classic side. It's the science. It's not debatable. Stupid politicians have no idea. They just went along with it, and then it's a self-reinforcing thing. Once you lock down, you can't open up because the justifications for locking down never go away. It took years for that to work out.
But those two examples, and you already kind of mentioned safetyism embedded in the proceduralistic apparatus of liberal Western democracies. It was two things in 2020 that sparked it off, and it might the magnitude of that critical mass of the COVID response to COVID and the Black Lives Matter Floyd riots. The responses could be mixed in with a lot of worry about Trump and Brexit and the rising specter of national interest rather than global interest. But it's really telling that our Chernobyl was about safety, specifically around a pandemic, and around egalitarian justice. Like that speaks to a trigger or a weakness, a flaw, or just the character, like a deep aspect of the character of Western democracies, that those are the two things that sparked this absolute reversal of almost every single liberal principle you can think of. Freedom of association, freedom of movement, capitalism, all that stuff was suspended. So what is have you thought about the deeper layers of why it was racial justice and the pandemic that caused these systems to just go haywire?
Yeah, so I think one interesting observation is that the pandemic stuff in the West really started in Europe. It came from Italy and Germany, and then spread throughout Europe.
The pandemic itself, or the pandemic response? Just to be clear.
The response, yeah. Okay. The heavy-handed lockdowns and all of this stuff, and you guys got a slightly later version of it, and I don't know how your debate worked, but I always had the idea that it was really Italy. Well, no, this is certainly true. Italy brought it to the West. Then we followed suit. Other European countries followed suit, and then the US a little bit after. So I always think of the pandemic response as something that sort of comes out of Europe and goes to North America. And the Floyd thing is the opposite. So it really comes out of North America, and then you see, of course, Germany doesn't like protests like this, so it didn't happen here. But there were Floyd protests all over Germany, especially in the UK. So there were almost different origins flowing in opposite directions, but at the same time, it's very interesting. Of course, liberalism has within it a lot of crazy and quite radical ideas that didn't seem that radical before because they were never so consistently applied, or people weren't interested in being purists about them in the way that they are now. So this constant anxiety I noticed this when I lived in the US. It feels like madness. It's seriously a pathology about racial justice. And of course there are self-interested blacks and other minorities who push this, but the biggest drivers of it are white liberals.
Yes.
They love this. It's their most favorite thing, and it's just the extremely pure application of a liberal ideological doctrine, and it's a reaction to the fact that the races aren't equal in the way that liberalism assumes. And it's sort of like a disconfirmation effect. We're constantly confronted with the suggestion that perhaps, we're not all the same except for differences in melanin content in our skin.
Yeah.
The ideology has this extreme immune response to this, right? And this goes crazy. And some pandemic stuff may be more boring, right? It's just you're going to kill your grandparents. Everyone has a right to health. All these really insane ideas, but again, they sound very, very mundane and very standard stuff. Very standard liberal stuff. So yeah.
What is the German perspective on the race relations? It's just interesting. You guys are being flooded with immigrants, but I don't really know the depth of what's actually going on in your country. But I'm curious about Germany's perspective on the rest of the West.
Sure. Yeah. So interesting thing about post-war consensus is that most Western countries have an original sin. So I guess the American original sin is slavery. Yeah. And so this really foregrounds race and race issues in your politics. But our original sin is the Holocaust. And so
yours is the original sin.
Yeah, exactly. All of the original sins are modeled on ours and are imperfect mimeographs of it. So ours is the original sin, and it's become a perverse point of national pride. Germans really, in a perverse way, like being responsible for the Holocaust, at least in this ancestral sense, because it gives them something to feel dour about. It's become a kind of patriotic point of identification, and it's one of the in this liberal world, it's an ethnic characteristic. One thing you can say about all the migrants we give passports to, well, they're not responsible for the Holocaust, right? They might be Germans in some sense, but they're not responsible for the Holocaust. So it becomes a point of German identification. So what this means is that the race stuff in Germany. So American culture is huge here, and this works in multiple levels. So American academic culture is a big thing in Germany, and critical race theory, all this stuff. It floats around in English departments and various literary industries, scholarly industries, and so forth. So it's there, and you see it seeping into, especially the Greens, who are sort of the aristocratic party in Germany.
I'm sorry, did you say the Greens are the aristocratic?
In the sense that they represent a sort of a political elite consensus, right? The closest aligned with what you might think. So the Greens occasionally, especially female Green politicians, love to try to bring out the race stuff, but it doesn't really catch on because we are guilty of something else, and the worrying over much about racial sins, which we might have perpetrated, really would impinge upon our Holocaust guilt. So it's
conflicting,
not really here.
Conflicting sins.
Yeah, you can only have one original sin. You can't have any others. So it's there, but it remains at a very low level, and it really is a one-to-one thing. Earlier, the Green family minister Lisa Powers, this is from the previous administration, she tried to add a lot of colonial. Germany had a few unimportant colonies, and so this means maybe we are also guilty of colonialism. So she tried to go around to various museums and so forth, and add little exhibits, beating us up over our colonial past. And this occasioned a very big backlash because they were like, well, this is taking attention away from the Holocaust, and literally so. And she had to, that whole thing was scrapped and it went away. So it really is a one-to-one thing. You can't have two original sins.
Fascinating. How does Germany get over that? Or is the path out of the post-war consensus to back away from these original sins and either find a different original sin or something that's the opposite of a sin, like a manifest destiny? And how does Germany fit in like going forward or moving past this kind of locked in, decaying, sclerotic moral order?
Yeah, I don't know how we get rid of it. I would have said, if I was born in the boomer generation, there wasn't one might have thought that it would just sort of fade out in time, and instead it's gotten more as those years have passed out of living memory, and nobody really has even any longer any living relatives who were anything but children then. It's become more intense, I think, because it's become more mythologized, and it's this a lot of the moderating forces in the post-war generations were because there was still a lot of, not necessarily ex-National Socialist Germans, but Germans who grew up in that time and who were able to keep the mythology on the ground, who were grounded, and there was living memory about what had happened, and that's no longer the case. So it kind of took off and went crazy.
Well, and add to that the American media apparatus being very partial to the Jewish experience, magnifying that mythologization and propagating it.
Absolutely. So I would have thought, but obviously that was wrong. It wouldn't go away. It's gotten more intense. It's in a way, it's become also more abstract. So I don't know if that, it's over with, and we're out of this moment when it's just another historical event.
Yes.
And about which it's possible to have differing opinions, about which it's possible to have theories. One of the amazing things about the whole National Socialist mythology is how attempts to historicize it, to just place the National Socialists in a historical context, to say, compare their militarism to Bismarck-era military endeavors. There's a lot of parallels there that suggest deeper systemic forces in the German state and so forth, not apologizing for the Nazis or anything, just saying this stuff is all very dangerous in German academia. It can get you in a lot of trouble. And I think we'll see that there's this era it's over with when it's just a simple historical period about which people can make arguments, and they don't have to make apologies for it or say it's okay. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of the National Socialists. They destroyed Germany, but nevertheless, it's a historical moment, and that you'll know it's over at that point. How we get from here to there, I have no idea. It's baffling. But it will happen. It will happen someday. It will happen. Napoleon right now is a historical figure. He was absolutely loathed in the late 19th, early 20th centuries. So it's, it will happen.
Yeah. So where's your interest mostly geopolitically? Like, I guess you have to confront Americanism constantly, and you're rewarded for that with internet engagement. But Germany's, I don't know, in a precarious situation or not, but it's kind of sandwiched between the American empire that's going through a state of either death, decay, or rebirth. We'll see how that shakes out. And then Russia with its pretensions or its desires for its own manifest destiny. Where does Germany fit? Because it seems like in an odd way you guys lost World War II, but you won. You got your Reich, and it just happened to be the European Union. You got your Reich eventually. It just happened to be within the liberal world order or procedure rather than the more authoritarian or fascistic type of power. Where does Germany fit into the world right now?
Well, that's a big question. Germany doesn't know where it fits. It's a really big issue. So right now, German politicians are. I don't know if the same thing exists in any other country, but they are completely without vision. They've decayed with each generation, gotten worse and worse. So even Merkel, as much as people dislike her and I dislike her, was a fairly original politician. She was really good at power politics.
Yes.
She was a schemer and a plotter. Yeah, absolutely. She was not to be trifled with. And she did a lot of bad things, but she did them really well. And our current politicians, they do they try to do a lot of bad things really poorly, and it's almost comedic, right?
The worst of both worlds.
Well, kind of. I guess it would be worse if they were more effective.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
that would be bad. But it's still so. Our entire political class is locked in some kind of massive denial, and there's a lot of speculation.
Well, is there any way for a circulation of elites to occur? Is there any incentive structure for somebody with original ideas and with political will to even mess around and get into the political system? Or would the political system destroy them or deny them any sort of claim? Like, why even
try?
Right? There's no circulation of elites, so I'm wondering, how would you even onboard an alternative structure unless there's a imminent threat from Russia or somewhere else?
Even that, and Germany would probably just get invaded.
Really?
There's all kinds of data. I saw an old poll about the number of Germans who would be willing to participate in, for example, in military campaigns to defend national borders, and it's shockingly low. It's
it was bred out of you
for long enough. It was just pounded out somehow.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's in itself a big existential problem. How do you run a country like this? But so Germany is set up with the assistance of the Allied powers as a defensive democracy. So we have the whole question of elites aside, which there are elites in government, but also outside of it, it's a complicated question. But just concentrating on the formal political apparatus, Germany, there's all these constitutional mechanisms. There's our entire domestic intelligence service. The Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution spends most of their time monitoring people who think wrong politically. So, for example, I'm surely under surveillance by the BFV. I know some of my exactly. I know some of my. It's pretty good. All people in my circle. Some you can write in and get it confirmed. But if you but that can be bad. They put a bad note in your file if you ask, or they may open a file. They may begin surveillance. This is literally true. They may begin surveillance of you even if they weren't before. If you ask if they're surveilling you, because they suspect that maybe you're up to something interesting. So it's kind of Kafkaesque. So
it's very German.
It's retarded. They're also complete idiots. So we have all these mechanisms, though, designed to sort of freeze German politics originally just to keep us as a good liberal democracy and to keep the Nazis out and to keep communists out. That was the idea. But over time, these mechanisms have been used to just prevent political upstarts from entering the political arena. And so right now, the AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, is they're pulling out all the tools against them to keep them out of power. And so exactly how you enact political change in a system like this, where the establishment parties use the tools of defensive democracy to stay in office regardless of how people vote, is a really big question. So I think what to do. There's not really a great answer here. I think there is a lot of pressure building on the system, and it remains to be seen whether the tools of defensive democracy can hold the system together. So I think we're going down a road here that ends in one of two ways, and one of them is that the AfD gets banned, and we end up in a kind of GDR 2.0 system, because then there'll be no majorities possible to the right. You'll ban, a third of the country, and the left parties will have a permanent majority. And the first goal would be to then begin trying to ban or exclude the center-right Christian Democrats, so that there's no answer. And we're going to end up. It's going to be a peaceful revolution in the other direction, and we're going to end up in some sort of GDR 2.0 system.
Which would be fine if reality didn't exist, if geopolitical reality didn't exist, energy, weapons, war, influence.
Yeah, it's something like these leftist systems really like it when the economy sucks. I think it really keeps, the booming economy is a source of entrepreneurs, alternative power centers, new men. They don't like that very much. So I think, it's also keeps, they want people to be demoralized, because one of the dangerous political forces is rising expectations in a populace, right? So if people are just beaten down, they think, it sucks, it's going to be terrible forever, then they have a real hold on power. Not saying they last forever, maybe it's another 45-year system like the DDR until it comes apart because of its own internal contradictions, right? But that's one possibility. The other, I guess, is not a spectacular win either, but it's that you see the Uniparty is split, and instead there's a new center-right AfD coalition. In that world, the left will have a lot of trouble getting into government again. So that would be an alternative system. And it would disappoint a lot of people, because the politics aren't going to be the right populist stuff that the AfD sells. It's still going to be a lot of pro-EU things, and it's still going to be Atlanticist and stuff, but it will fix some problems anyway. How long this entire political order lasts is another question.
Are there? We kind of skirted like economic problems or pressures rather, and then I guess issues of identity or of whatever it means to be right wing. I wonder if there's an aesthetic possibility or probability of an aesthetic revolution, or if you notice an idea of what it is to be German, but kind of boiling back up or coming back up through the arts, through something beyond just political talk or whinging, right? Political whinging, things sucks and stuff like that. I wonder if there's a positive vision there of what it is to be German.
I think there could be, but it's very far off. So obviously there's it's a specific German identity, a nationalist German identity is something that's I would say that existed in a certain form. This sounds contradictory, more in the DDR, more in communist East Germany than it does today in the unified Germany. Because the socialists had to create some sort of nationalist, socialist workers ideal, and you talk about absolutely, and to I think a lot of workers' politics or labor-centered politics inevitably involves nationalist elements, whether that's directly intended or originally intended or not. It was in the West too. There maybe in the 80s or 90s there was still some elements of German nationalism, but now it's not really present anymore. And should the right populists in the AfD try to create their own culture about this, with different slogans and so forth, but they're a political party. It's difficult. I think that kind of thing proceeds from politics that don't exist yet. So one should perhaps not get it backwards and allow political changes to occur first, and then try to think about what a new kind of national identity looks like on the other side.
What's the reality, or could you give me a more realistic understanding of the immigration issue in your country? 'Cause, I mean, I only see the horror stories, so I don't know to what degree it's awful, bad, okay, and to what degree people are not liking it, and to what degree there might be political will for remigration or something that America is trying to do.
So there's a huge point of disconnect between the political class and pretty much everybody. So there's a massive number of a solid majority of Germans opposed to current levels of migration, want the migrants to leave. It's in the 50s, so it's pretty large. In parliamentary systems, you rarely get anyone over 50% on any side of a question. There's always 3 or 4 different instantiations of every issue. So it's, so 55% in the polls or something is really big. So there's and even the others, no one's happy about mass migration except for a couple of green lunatics. So it's not a good thing.
But it's still happening. It's still going on, and no matter how much you vote against it, it keeps on going. So there's got to be some sort of power center beyond our system, beyond the German elites, that's causing this to happen. Or maybe it's
the political class is at least, well, even this has changed. I would say through COVID, the political class was still, at least spoke favorably about open borders on most occasions. That's really changed in the last 2 or 3 years alone. Now migration is discussed pretty much negatively by everybody. Not that they do anything about it, but it's disliked, and some of the very same politicians who were talking about diversity as our strength and so forth are now saying, oh well, look how much we have got the new asylum applications down. They're down 50%. We're going to get them even lower, and all this stuff. So the tone has changed. I think actually it's sort of odd. What changed the tone a lot was the Ukraine war and the stories that a lot of migrants were being sent to Poland from Belarus as sort of a population warfare a tactic. And so this got into the evil Putin story that he's using migrants as a weapon, and then this sort of, well, that must mean migrants aren't really good then. So that seemed to be a key element in changing the perception. Also after COVID, there was a lot of exhaustion, so we opened up, and then the migrants flooded right in. It felt really absurd, and so anyway, things have changed. But the migrants keep coming. So how bad is it? The asylum applications are down, mostly for geopolitical reasons. Frontex, the EU, have done some work to close migrant routes, but that doesn't have much to do with our government specifically. But also other things geopolitically are changing. It's not worth talking about all that stuff. So asylum applications are down right now. About 10% of the German population is a non-Western, non-European migrant background or migrant.
Well, I'm 10%. Sorry, 10% of the entire population is from somewhere else?
It's more than that if you include Europeans. A lot of EU people are here, so forth. But if you exclude all of them, then you're about 10%. So 10 to 11%. But that's pretty good, UK is higher. It could be worse.
Could be worse. I mean, 10% though. That's a major blow to national sovereignty, identity.
It's
so many different factors. Not to mention to what degree they're contributing to welfare collapse or strain on that system. Sorry.
So I'm subtracting the over 1 million ethnic Germans who returned from Russia. So the Volga Germans, so they're not in that number because they're Germans. And if you want to make it even a little more optimistic, you can take the 3 million Turks out, and then you're 6 to 7% migrants. The Turks have been here for a long time. They're kind of the German
freaking Ottomans, man. They just won't quit.
Yeah. It's like the German version of the American Mexicans. They're very similar ethnicities in many ways.
Oh, really?
A lot of sort of gold chain race, but not as big a problem. Somewhat integratable, religious. They like to pose in expensive automobiles. They have larger families, but they integrate. They all speak German. It's not terrible. You're not really worried about them. They're not big. They're not going to assault you in the train station at night or something. It's very similar to. It always felt to me when I was in the US that these people are like Turks in Germany. It's very similar. Social, cultural level. So take the 3 million Turks out who also been here since the guest worker period in the mid-20th century. So take them out, then we're dealing with 6 to 7% migrants who have come recently and who we should really think about how to get to leave. And of those we're talking maybe half are citizens. So the rest aren't. And of course more come, but then actually some leave too. So right now it's tendency somewhat rising, but not as crazy as it was.
Who? Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking for. I kind of want to get a not theological, but a theoretical understanding of how you process information. Like, who are your favorite thinkers, or the most salient thinkers that consistently provide you with tools to analyze and cause engagement to happen on Twitter. But I saw that Chelsea Clinton knows of you as a science denialist.
Oh yeah, that was during the pandemic. Yeah, she yeah.
I guess
the most famous I've ever been. That's great.
How based are you, or what is your thought based on? Or would you put yourself in the dissonant right camp or the Machiavellians? Like what political lens do you find most salient for processing information that's just flooding at you online?
Yeah, I would be. I am. Yeah, sort of. I think the Machiavellians, Burnham's camp of people are probably the closest to my thought. Though I think a lot of that stuff is a little bit arcane and overblown, and it's the one should try to develop simple, straightforward, explanatory theories of how things function and not get bound up in all this dogmatic stuff that Plato said. Yeah, so yeah, but that's generally my style of thought, to try to understand states from the point of view of their behavior. Yeah.
There's that saying, a system is what it does, or the meaning of the purpose of a system is what it does.
Yeah, purpose of a system is what it does.
Yeah. So where do you find the most interesting discussions happening right now, beyond just the banter that happens constantly online? Like what are is there an edge of discourse that's fruitful for you, or that you see right now?
It's really difficult. No,
no.
There's not a lot. Well, Twitter is kind of fun and stuff, but
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to call out specific German publications or anything for a few reasons, but there's some thought on the German, well, because it will piss off some people or not to the right people or something. But there's some interesting thought on the German right for sure. I would say I think I like new right thinkers in general. So the French school of the new right, and it's German descendants or twins, or however that.
What are some of the ideas from that bower of discourse?
The idea of the new right is that you have to is that the National Socialist, the fascist period is to be disregarded and move beyond. So the old right is always trying to defend and rehabilitate the historical reputations of the great offenders of the world wars, and the new right is very interested in either reaching back before them for new traditions, to find neglected traditions of thought that were set aside before say 1933, or developing new analyses. So they are the new right as opposed to the old right. But it's a more intellectual sphere of political analysis that I find compelling. So that interests me. I'm very interested in just intellectually in conservative revolution era thinkers. So the Weimar era right wing. That's interested me. But I don't like a lot of political dogmatism, or the people who are always saying, this page Schmidt said this, therefore I think that's really kind of stupid. I think you can read Schmidt and learn a lot from him, but it's not like these aren't like divine texts, So yes,
yeah. How did fascism go wrong? Like, what was wrong with it, and why did it go in the direction it did? And because you bring up the Weimar Republic and how there were variations of ideas in the right wing, but somehow fascism took hold. And I'm not just asking like the path of political power that Hitler took itself, but the ideas that it emulated and how they went astray from a from a possibility of a right that would have gone in a different direction. Like, and fascism is such a sticking point right now for the liberal world order. It's one of the enemies that we defeated, but we can't even really understand it as a historical process that went awry. Maybe it didn't go awry. Maybe it was going to do something awesome, and it just it was opposed by a superior power. I'm just wondering, like, where fascism went off the rails, and if you dial the clock back, was there a point where other ideas could have occurred?
That's a very good question. So first of all, just to be a little pedantic, just in case anyone who knows me is listening, obviously, of course, the fascists are primarily, a Mediterranean aesthetic movement, artistic movement, involving, of course, World War I veterans. It's about masculinity. It's about it's almost there are apolitical forms of fascism that are solely interested in art. There are socialist manifestations of fascism. People have really socialist ideas. So it's sort of an aesthetic movement that can be fit onto a number of political ideologies. And actually, so it's become a term now for National Socialists and so forth. But actually, the National Socialists, after they became strong enough to sort of move out from under the shadow of the Italians and Mussolini, tended to quietly repudiate fascism, and they saw themselves. They thought fascism was too heroic, too individualistic, and they wanted a collective ideology, a collective German ideology that saw the entire German people as acting on behalf of collective interests. So for that reason, there's sort of a quiet repudiation of fascism after late 30s, early 40s. Now but of course, what happened with the National Socialists? What went wrong? Well, I think the first thing to understand is that they were very extreme. That's true. One shouldn't. There's a lot of, I think, especially in American political circles. In Germany, it's a little bit illegal, which keeps a damper on this. But there's a lot of revisionism, okay, and without commenting on the accuracy of that or not, I think it really does go wrong when the revisionists try to paint, say, National Socialists as cuddly, friendly,
misunderstood.
Misunderstood. Yeah, they were extremely fierce, dangerous, Machiavellian political actors, and they gained power because they were willing to do a lot of things other people weren't willing to do, including betray former rivals and use ruthless force and so forth. So they weren't friendly, but a lot of the political tone of this time on the right is set by the communist threat and the threat of communism.
Yes.
So, we had the Soviet in Munich, the idea that somehow the very unstable, weak Weimar Republic might fall to communist revolutionaries was felt very deeply. Also, at the same time, and paradoxically, there was within the communist camp a big demoralization about how they had failed to achieve a revolution and how they were now sitting in a parliament having votes and so forth, which I guess if you're a communist is not really what you want to be doing. And so a lot of communists defect to National Socialist ranks, to the extreme, or not the extreme, let's call it the illiberal right, defect to the illiberal, the National Revolutionary right in the Weimar Republic. And so you get a lot of this somewhat leftist revolutionary spirit.
Because they want to get things done.
Yeah, they think it's the new game in town. Yeah, you see a lot of people are just radicals. They don't really care, what direction.
Will Stancil, I just want to do something. Somebody needs to do something. Kind of thing.
Will Stancil could well end up being a white nationalist before this is all over with. It's not inconceivable. And anyway, so a lot of these people, so the National Socialists, they were reacting to the communist threat. They had a lot of revolutionary energy, and I think it's always useful, especially since the beginning of the 20th century, when monarchist parties disappear and the old aristocratic order is gone, and the original meaning of the right is lost, right? Because the right was originally about aristocracy, keeping the monarchy, keeping the Reich, the Kaiserreich, and so forth. When all that's gone, the old aristocratic order, the right becomes kind of unmoored, and it becomes more as a response to the left, right? And
I think the right has defined the right since the loss of monarchy. That when you look at the right and you try to ask what right, it's just it's not left. It has nothing.
Yes.
since then? I'm sorry, go on.
No, it's a response to the left. So there's a very extreme left in the Weimar period, and before the Russian Revolution, and so the German right is a response to this and is as extreme, and or maybe more extreme. But that explains a lot of their radicalism and why they were so aggressive and uncompromising. Mm-hmm. And so that if they went wrong, well, I mean, they're the product of this system. Another thing, I'm not trying again to excuse. I'm very sorry about all the sins my ancestors created, but I think it's also important to understand systemically. So I'm not excusing anybody, just understanding systemically what happened. And I think another aspect of their craziness is that Germany was in a kind of geopolitical trap, and this was very important for both world wars. And that is that the sort of dominant Anglo Empire doesn't want a potential rival power emerging on the continent. Okay, and so Germany is becoming to be a big, in the early 19th century, Germany was a backwater. They industrialized very quickly, and they became major continental power. And the Anglos,
without colonialism. A little
bit of colonialism, just enough to feel bad about. But without colonialism, but they became a major industrial power, and a lot of the world wars are. For the first one and the second one, the Anglo-Americans trying to keep the Germans boxed in and trying to prevent them from becoming a great power. And they collaborated ultimately with the Russians in this game. So I think whatever party came to power in Germany in the Weimar period, came to hold power seriously and came to preside over Germany's reindustrialization, which was inevitable, that was going to happen sooner or later. That party would face enormous resistance from the outside powers with an interest in Europe. And so I think the National Socialists knew this as well. And they thought their way out of this trap was an extremely aggressive campaign to dominate the continent and try to shut out.
Do exactly what the other powers feared would happen.
Perhaps they thought, well, this is what they don't want us to do, so maybe that's what we should do. But so that was, and so all of this together made for a very chaotic and
volatile,
ultimately, failed political movement, which lasted only 12 years and changed everything.
Well, it changed the world. So in a certain respect, Hitler kind of won by becoming like the central figure of our age. But what if you dial that back, like what is the alternative? If there is a right, if there is something that's not just not left, and it's bereft of monarchy or the old aristocratic order, what does it have? Like what are the ties that bind a people and cause a collective self-interest that is adaptable, that's modern, that is not, I guess it sounds like the only options we have are collectivism and individualism, and I don't think that that's rich or correct. There might be something else.
Right, that's one axis. I mean, obviously, you want to find a position between those poles that is appropriate for your situation. So I think it's natural that in peacetime, of course, when times of security, countries become more individualistic, and faced by external threats or great challenges, become more collectivist. I think a lot of sort of the Soviet bloc collectivism was because they were under extreme threat for their whole existence. They were constantly undermined by Western prosperity and the fact that it was better to live in the West, and everyone could listen to their television, Western television in the East, and see a better, different world. And so they're very insecure regimes. And so you see this collectivist response to a foreign threat, and you see also, of course, the National Socialist collectivism, very similar in flavor, actually, though from another side of the political spectrum, is again a response to geopolitical threats, to outside and internal, according to them, threats. So there's those two. I don't know. It's hard at this point to get beyond the nation state as a governing principle of politics, and however out of fashion it is, and however old it seems, it's still around. and it's still more consequential than any other form of political organization. So we talk about the EU and it's a huge problem, but that's largely because all the nation states agree to participate in European Union idiocy. If the Germany could leave the EU tomorrow or break EU rules, and the EU would have very little recourse. The nation states are still very powerful, which means that there must be a happy medium of nationalism that is necessary to maintain the current order, and it is not extreme in the nationalist, not a hyper nationalist sort of destructive, chauvinistic thing. That's not good. But it's also not what we have now. Is very much the opposite of that.
Yeah.
It is also, by the way, just as much cringe, just as much. It's just terrible and it's stupid. It's not. It won't continue like this forever, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, but when you look at the outside world, you have Putin that's able to make decisions. I mean, you can disagree with what those decisions are, or question their validity or their moral worth, but he's still able to make decisions. And then you have a figure like Trump who's able to at least say things and make overtures to decisions, right? Whether or not American politics and the American system can allow any given person to make decisions, Trump is able to be somebody who feels like he's making decisions. I don't know if there's anybody in Germany that, but I'm really disconnected from your political process, but I wonder if there's a longing for some version of somebody who can make decisions and what that would look like.
Yeah, obviously there needs to be a new kind of leadership. As I said, they get worse and worse with every generation. We did have pretty clear. We had Helmut Kohl was pretty good. Schröder was, even though he was a social democrat, was actually the last chancellor who achieved decent results for the country. So we have had, in living memory, functional politicians. I said even Merkel was functional, just not good. But it's really the last. It's late Merkel to now, so we're talking about 8 years where it seems truly hopeless. There's nobody in the establishment parties is a powerful personality. Is it all an original person? You can just understand original people when they speak. They have interesting ideas. They say things you haven't heard before. There used to be politicians like this a while ago. Now the biggest hope is Markus Söder, who's the minister president of my home state, Bavaria. And he is a person who would have been an absolute mediocrity 15 years ago, but the Christian, the CSU and the CDU, the center-right parties, he's the big hope for the future, because Merz has failed so much. Maybe he can be a chancellor in the future, and he's kind of. Is unimpressive and irritating. He just has more personality than everybody else, so it's I don't know. There has to be a change. Above all, what happened? Germany has just this extremely conservative political system. We have the same parties, except for the Greens and the AfD, that we've had since the early 50s. They're all the same parties. Wow. And if you look at other European countries, they've had, French, they have new parties every 5 minutes, I can't keep up with all these guys, and even the Italians, their political system is very fluid. There's a lot of movement, and the German system is structurally conservative. Also, Germans are socially conservative, culturally conservative, socially conservative. And so it's become a very sclerotic system. Yeah. Everyone involved in these parties is just a careerist, just trying to make their way up the ladder. This is one of the things that actually I have many criticisms of the AfD. I'm by no means a party member or on board with everything they do. But one of the things that makes them interesting is there's a lot of just original people there who say different things, and you hear different ideas, and some of them, of course, are a little coarse, or it's always the problem with right-wing parties is that people who want careers, there's a brain drain, you lose a lot of people who go to the establishment because that's what you're supposed to do.
Get ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the AfD, despite that, has some really good, interesting people, and even their more coarse members are original. They say things that they have ideas and plans and stuff that you've never heard before. It's a breath of fresh air, even if they never get into power. It's still good to hear, and it's no wonder why they're doing so well. If some of the establishment parties could have these kinds of people in them, we would have less of a problem. So I'm not entirely black-pilled on this front, but I agree it's a big issue.
Yeah. Are you particularly religious, if you don't mind me asking?
I was raised Catholic, Bavarian, but I am not. I have not been religious since early adulthood.
Is it odd to be on the right wing and not be religious? Or is that kind of?
I don't know about America. I never really got a feel for this. I was always in sort of left-wing, liberal, left progressive circles as a professor. But in Germany, no, it's not at all. There has been a lot of dissatisfaction with the AfD because it's a mostly secular right party, and so there's not really a political home for Christian Democrats, for Christian democracy types who want that kind of politics. And so there's been efforts to found a sort of a sister party or something else. But no, by no means. I would say the right in Germany right now is predominantly, or at least 60% secular.
Yeah. What kind of work are you heading into now? You said you got a book, at least one book in you, but what are you creating of late?
The book's been done for a long time. I just have to write a final chapter. And then I don't know if I had a German publisher, but who asked me to write it, but I don't know if they still want it because I'm so late. But we'll see. It's not a big deal. It's I don't know what I'm going to do. I've been hardly blogging at all for 2 weeks because it's very dark and cold, and I'm a little depressed. So when I recover from this, I will just try to blog more regularly.
Blog about what? I mean, I guess it sounds like you're a little bit in the fallow period, but I'm just wondering what are you interested in, or if there's stirrings of ecstasy for an intellectual endeavor in your depths.
Well, yeah. So I want to. I have some ideas. I want to start a series of posts on taboo books. Because there's this whole idea in the liberal world that there are. At bookstores you go and there's like the forbidden books table, and it's all books that have never ever been forbidden, and that you're actually assigned to read in school, and but there really are books that you're not allowed to read, or that you'd be looked down on for reading, and I guarantee you I can find a book that any person will think you're a terrible person for reading, and I want to write a series of blog posts reviewing these books. So I asked around among my friends. I have a massive list. So I was going to open it up with Mein Kampf. It seemed appropriate. And the idea is to write reviews.
Have you read it?
Oh yeah, I've read it.
Is it good? Book. I mean, it's a bad book. Like, just as a book.
It's boring. Yeah. It's boring. It's scattered. The National Socialists weren't big intellectuals. Hitler himself is not a good writer. He's
better painter.
He can't. No, he's terrible. He's a tourist painter. It's amazing. His paintings are like. You can still buy paintings like that today, and at the same scenes. You're a tourist. You go and you pay €20 for the little oil painting or whatever. Yeah. He's a tourist painter, but. Yeah, but no, it's not. It's a mix. It's sort of like a personal political biography, but the idea is to do objective reviews. So just to talk about does it work as a book, the arguments convincing, not to polemicize against it or anything, but if it's genuinely bad, then explain why. That's what I want to start with. Then I thought I would review the Pink Swastika. This I think it's kind of a troll book about how the Nazis were all homosexuals. So that pisses everybody off. So it's a very funny book. And then I have a long list of others. So I thought I would try to start the series and do one every couple of weeks.
Fun.
And well, not just German stuff, but other things too. And so that was my big idea.
Well, if somebody just comes across this interview and is enticed and wants to read more about you, like what's some works that you're particularly proud of that you've produced?
Oh, I don't know. People have to know. People have to say what of mine they find interesting. I'm not a very good self promoter. If you want to look at my blog, you can try to search for things that have a lot of views but aren't COVID related, because all the COVID stuff is out of date now. No one cares, that's when everything I wrote back then went absolutely viral. It was a very crazy time.
Were you surprised by that, by the reaction to your thought when COVID hit and you started?
It was really. So looking back on it, everybody was at home. A lot of just human attention was on the internet back then, so it was easy to get things going, and the quality of public discourse about pandemic matters was so low, it was so bad that you just had to be a normal, somewhat skeptical person to produce original, interesting content about. And so it was in many ways a good time to start a blogging career, which is what I did.
The problem that I had, well, among the many problems that I had during the COVID era, especially the vaccine debate, was that everybody had 10 papers that they could point to. When you go into a situation, I didn't know. I was confronted by my own ignorance with how to just even process information. And I think that worked in the favor of the powers that be, that they could just, I guess it's info jamming. They just completely jammed and flooded. So how did you navigate that sheer amount of ambiguity and conflict in just data and fact and stuff? Or did you focus on something else to navigate that? And then what do you think help people when people found you, the way that you produced information or presented information? What was a way that you helped people during that time with your thought?
Yeah, so my approach to the pandemic in general was to try to keep your eyes on a couple of big metrics that are publicly available, indisputable, and just understand from them what's happening. And of course, you can talk about the papers, you can get into the weeds on this or that, but if you just keep your eyes on the big metrics, you will understand mainly what's going on. And so what I worked out, first of all, was ICU occupancy in Germany was tracked on a website. So anytime someone says, oh my God, our beds are over capacity or whatever, you check and see. And what you notice is actually there was almost no variation in ICU occupancy across the entire pandemic. So when the summer, when infections went down, ICU occupancy was steady. And in the winter, when infections went up, ICU occupancy hardly budged. And it seems that ICU occupancy is managed to have the same level of occupancy all the time, probably for bureaucratic reasons in employment, and it's not really such a thing as ICU beds in Germany filling up. And so that's one thing I figured out. Another thing I figured out was tracking other viruses. So we have virus surveillance, flu surveillance every year, and so keeping an eye on what other viruses are doing. And there you see what effects by comparing numbers of positive rhinovirus samples and flu samples against past years, there you see what the pandemic measures might be doing to some viruses and not to others. So you see there's clearly a class of viruses, like rhinoviruses, that are just totally immune to all of our measures, just like COVID itself was. Yeah. So that makes sense that there's some viruses that these measures don't affect, and COVID was one of them. During the vaccines, it was really just the infection statistics. You could just follow them and see nothing was really changing at all. And this was something that really frustrated me about the whole COVID skeptical sphere, was they always wanted to call the PCR tests into question, and say they were fraudulent tests and all of this. But it was obvious to me.
What's PCR? I just have to.
The PCR tests, the swab your mouth or your nose, or whatever they did. The polymerase chain reaction tests. Right, so the diagnostic panel. They wanted to say this was the basis of all infection statistics during the pandemic. And the COVID skeptics always wanted to say the tests were fraudulent or the numbers were made up or whatever. I found this extremely frustrating because actually, if they're making the numbers up, they're making the arguments for us, because everything it was the first you could see the vaccines weren't doing anything. We had completely normal infection curves as if nobody had been vaccinated. It was really amazing, and so I just in mortality statistics also. But you keep your eyes on the big metrics, and you sort of see the entire pandemic narrative was just nonsense. And that's how I built my leadership. Yeah.
Do you think it was? I guess we opened with this conversation, so I'm wondering to what degree you think it was a cabal, and to what degree you think it was just something that was baked into the system that just reached critical mass on accident. If there, I don't even know. You're in Germany, so you probably can't even talk about this. But was there a central authority that was suppressing the world through this, or was it just kind of a random thing? And the broader question, or the deeper question, being, to what degree do you resist or jive with some sort of conspiracy thinking with regard to finding intent in these major patterns or events?
Yeah, so there was a cabal. But they weren't hidden, and you could find evidence of their activity. As I said, there was a pandemic establishment that, via prior arrangement, had mechanisms to take control over large areas of public policy, not just public health policy, but public policy in the event of a pandemic event, however defined. So as soon as there was a pandemic event, these people were already going to be in charge. So what the cabal did, there was a lockdown cabal, and at least in Germany there was. And what they did was work to convince the pandemic establishment that lockdowns were necessary. So that's what they did. And I can name precise people. It's actually kind of creepy. A lot of them appear to be literal agents paid by China, who raised rapidly to positions of power in the health bureaucracy, in the government. They sat on major advisory boards. They pumped in information straight from mysterious advisory teams in Wuhan and in China to tell us how to lock down and how to do it. And they wrote all the early policies, and they put us on the path to lockdown. So there was absolutely this cabal in the beginning. Their job was to convince the empowered pandemic establishment to lock down. Now, once these decisions had been made, all the other lockdowns, the vaccine insanity, all that stuff was downstream of that original decision. So the cabal had a brief role, then they were irrelevant. It didn't matter anymore. And then they were gone. But yeah, there was a lockdown cabal, and that's how they worked. And I think, I don't know exactly how it worked in other countries, but I think, these debates are playing out similar times, and it seems there's a lot of central coordination with China. We know there was a lot of coordination between China and Italy, to the point of having Chinese virus advisors flown in and everything. So I think there's a lot of efforts behind the scenes via diplomatic and other channels to work with existing sympathetic people in Germany on the part of the Chinese to sell lockdowns behind the scenes to us. And that's what happened. So yeah, there was a cabal, but it's kind of a boring cabal. It's not the big people. This is generally my theory about cabals, is that once you activate bureaucratic institutions and systems, you're no longer running the show. They are. So you can definitely plant ideas, or you can provoke retaliation or cause hysteria. But once the reaction's going, it's involving 20,000 people scattered across 500 different government departments, and you're no longer steering anything. They're in charge now. This massive hive mind is doing it. And so things can't be steered. They can be provoked or set off.
Yeah, interesting. So like lead through reaction kind of situation.
And it's also unpredictable what will happen. So yeah. So the cabal can't really say beyond a few weeks what the outcome will be. I don't think anybody. It's pretty clear from the lockdowns, for example, the way they were originally sold, and you can see there's preparation that we were only supposed to lock down once, and they were supposed to. There was sort of a built-in plan. You could see how the testing was designed early on and so forth. We were supposed to lock down once, and they were supposed to declare victory in the summer, and then we were just supposed to open up. That seems to have been the plan. You could sort of read this between the lines of emails that were released and so forth. They were like, well, we'll lock down, and then of course maybe it goes away in the summer, and then we can just open up and declare victory and move on. I think that was originally kind of the game plan, but it got away from them. They weren't in charge anymore, and the system decided that lockdowns were just fantastic, and just kept doing it. And that's curious.
Well, yeah, unless you had protest immunity. Of just like going and protesting.
Yeah. In America, yes, it's completely safe to protest on behalf of racial justice.
Egalitarianism is just a shield from
absolutely.
Sort of virus, yeah.
The virus immediately respects your racial sensibilities.
It'll raise a fist along with you. What's a hobby that you have that's non-intellectual or intellectual adjacent, non-writing? Something that you just really enjoy.
I've gotten away from this the past few years because I've been moving and a lot of chaos, but I like to repair watches.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you just you go and you find them, or do you have like a little side hustle, or like how did you get into that?
No, I don't. I got into it during during the pandemic actually, when there was nothing to do and just hours and hours sitting around. This is before I started blogging, so I enrolled in a correspondence watchmaking course and invested thousands of euros in all this material.
Really?
Now I have a whole little workshop. Yeah, and I do it. It used to be easier. Now I think it's become a lot of YouTubers have sold this as a hobby. So now it's a lot. It used to be very easy to get a bunch of just decent watches that were broken and then fix them, which is sort of satisfying in itself. Now the market's tightened up and so forth. It's not as simple. But it's fun to do. I should get back to it. I haven't done it for about a year.
Oh, like a little artisanal shed that you go to and just escape from the world. Do you think God is I guess you're not a God guy, but do you think God's a watchmaker? Or?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's a very good model for. I mean, so a watch, it's a very efficient machine. Every part has sort of a purpose, and the universe seems very extravagant to me. A lot of things don't seem necessary, and they exist anyway. So it's in that way. No, I don't think a watchmaker is a very good idea for a very good analogy for whatever God is trying to do. So for example, a lot of astronomical bodies and so forth. We could just do without them. Yeah.
Very extravagant. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Thank you very much for joining me. It's just a fascinating conversation. I'll link to your blog. It's could you repeat how to pronounce your awesome name? Eugyppius. Eugyppius?
Well, you can say, Eugyppius is good. Yeah, that's great. Mm-hmm.
And your blog is a plague chronicle, but it seems like you investigate all sorts of plagues at this point.
Well, yeah, I moved on so I primarily cover German politics, some American politics. I think people want me to do more American stuff.
Yeah,
but
of course.
But I know German stuff much better, and there's not really any good consistent sources for German stuff. So I try to do that. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, that was fun. That was really fun. Thank you. I'll let you know when it's up, and I'll end the recording now.
Great.
Cool.